You are listening to the GodArchy podcast, where we shove a crowbar between state and church. This is the spot where Christian faith intersects with libertarian anarchism and voluntarism. The GodArchy podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Libertarian Christian Institute. I'm your host, Mike Meharry. In this episode, we're going to talk about cryptocurrency. Now, I reckon I've heard of a Bitcoin, but what in the world's Bitcoin? Now, I assume that a lot of my audience is pretty cryptocurrency savvy. A lot of you folks probably own Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of the other cryptocurrencies that are out there. Some of you may use cryptocurrencies. But I think a lot of people, even who have kind of a basic understanding of cryptocurrencies, can quickly get lost in the details. And I mean, I've owned Bitcoin. I still own Bitcoin. You can donate cryptocurrency to GodArchy at the GodArchy website. But I have often wondered, really, what's the future of cryptocurrency? I've always seen it as something with a lot of potential for those of us who care about liberty and freedom. It is a decentralized money. It can be used as a medium of exchange. It is difficult for the government to track and control. So those are all positive things, but is there realistically a future for cryptocurrency, and can it really be something that will help expand liberty? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on the podcast. My guest will be Joël Valenzuela, and Joël is a Free State Project guy up in New Hampshire, and he has actually been living on Bitcoin. Like, that's all he uses in his day-to-day life. He buys his groceries, he pays his bills, he does everything using cryptocurrency. When I heard that he was doing this, I'm like, that's insane. How do you do that? And you're going to find out exactly how he's done it. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the more basic things. What is cryptocurrency? Why should we, as freedom-loving folks, care about it? We're going to talk a little bit about the issues that we've seen with the volatility in price and the FTX change. So we're going to get into all of these things, and I think you'll find it very interesting. If you're at all interested in money and cryptocurrency and how it really works, Joël knows, because he's actually, again, using it every single day, which just still boggles my mind. Before we get into all of that, I want to tell you about a couple of GodArchy sponsors. First off, do you like coffee? Are you a coffee drinker? My wife is a voracious coffee drinker. Don't bug her till she gets her cup of coffee. When she drinks coffee, she is drinking Fox & Sons coffee. She tells me that it is the best dark roast coffee that she has ever had. Saying a lot because she's tried a lot of different coffees. Fox & Sons won't disappoint. You can go to foxandsons.com. You'll not only get delicious whole bean, organically roasted coffee, you're also supporting a cool family business. Stephen Fox, he developed his love for coffee as a kid going to work with his dad on the weekends. He said he started this company both to honor his father and to pass on a business along with the spirit of entrepreneurship to his two sons. He has a dark roast and a light roast. And again, according to my wife, fantastic, outstanding coffee, small business, produced by a fellow Christian, a fellow libertarian. So check it out. Go to foxandsons.com. So it's FOXNSONS.com. And of course, I don't send you anywhere empty-handed. You can save 20% off any order over $25 with the promo code GodArchy. So check that out. And to complete your breakfast, how about granola? Do you love granola? But are you one of these people that's trying to avoid the carbs? I am. I have just the thing for you, Purinola. I'm talking about grain-free granola made with only real food ingredients: organic coconut flakes, organic virgin coconut oil, cashews, pumpkin seeds, almond slices, sesame seeds, and more. 2 flavors available: cinnamon, vanilla, and maple almond. It's delicious. And at under 5 grams net carbs, it will not spike your blood sugar. Purinola is also, like Fox & Sons, a small business set up by a Christian and a philosophical anarchist. They're based in Georgia. They will ship nationwide for a flat rate of $5.99 or free shipping on orders over $60. You can get quantity discounts on their website. Visit PureAnola, PureAnola.com. And again, not sending you anywhere empty-handed. Use coupon code GodArchy. You'll get 20% off of your first order. So, one more item of business before we get into the interview. I need your support. GodArchy, it takes time. It takes money. It takes effort. And I need support. Just going to be flat out honest with you. The more support that I can get, the more I can do with this GodArchy project. I would love to do a GodArchy book. I would love to take the podcast to a weekly podcast, but I can't do that unless I'm getting the support that I need. So if you're interested in supporting the GodArchy podcast, you can go over to GodArchy.org, click Support GodArchy, and you'll see exactly how you do that. Also, by supporting GodArchy, you're also supporting the work of the Libertarian Christian Institute. That is my partner in this project, libertarianchristianinstitute.com. Make sure you check out, or that's not right, it's libertarianchristians.com, libertarianchristians.com. Check out what they're doing over there. I am proud to be partnered with them to advance both the cause of liberty and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And by supporting GodArchy, you're also supporting the Libertarian Christian Institute. 40% of the support that comes in goes over to the folks at the Libertarian Christian Institute to help support the Libertarian Christian or Christians for Liberty broadcast network and other projects that are going over there. So please support what we're doing. And, if you don't have the means to support the project financially, you can just help out by simply sharing these episodes, sharing the articles, visiting libertarianchristians.com. And that interaction helps trigger the algorithms, and it will allow you to allow us to expand our reach. So please check out all of those things, and I will be very, very appreciative. Okay, that's enough business. Let's get into this fantastic discussion with Joël. All right, I'm here with Joël. I'm very, very excited to talk to you about crypto because I'm a crypto dummy. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. What about you?
I'm hanging in there. I can't complain too much. So I've been wanting to do an episode on crypto, and thought, man, this is a perfect opportunity. You're the perfect person to talk about because you're actually using it in the way that I think it was kind of intended. And what I'd like to start with, if you're willing, we're going to assume that some people don't know much more about crypto than maybe what they hear on the news. Can you kind of give the dumb guy explanation of what a cryptocurrency is?
Yeah. And now this is one of those things where whenever you're trying to explain some radically different technology from everything in the past, there's always going to be something sort of lost. Like imagine anyone trying to explain what is an internal combustion engine.
Right.
And I'm sure you could kind of do a simple thing where you extract oil from the ground and then you turn it into this fuel, and this thing burns the fuel, and by burning it, it moves a bunch of gears and things, and the car moves. So right. That's kind of the thing. Basically, cryptocurrency, as we call it today, is a decentralized digital ledger, which literally means a ledger as in like an Excel spreadsheet or anything, just like an accounting system. And it's digital, meaning it's not a piece of paper. It's completely digital, and it's decentralized, which is one of the harder things to kind of imagine. Is basically anyone can participate in running it. Mm-hmm. It's not one company or one group just runs the whole thing. It's some people run it, and if I wanted to start running it, I could just plug in, and now I'm running part of it, and anyone kind of does what they want. And as a key, benefit of that is it tends to be censorship resistant, meaning it's hard to stop people from doing what they want on it. Meaning it's hard. Like if I pay you and then someone doesn't want me to do that, well, they can't really do anything. It's not like a bank account that they can freeze.
Right.
So that's kind of the overview of what cryptocurrencies are. It started with money, right? With things like Bitcoin that are just used as a new form of money that are, again, decentralized, and then they're digital and they're accounting systems. But increasingly, crypto started to kind of encroach into other areas of life beyond purely just money, such as accounting of property titles
Right.
and running of complex programs and financial systems and things like that. It's starting to get far beyond money until I kind of think within the next 20, 50 years or so, everything will be a crypto version of it, including, this kind of there's already a crypto for podcasts. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I guess for those of us who are advocates of freedom and self-determination, the fact that really nobody is quote unquote in charge is kind of the beauty of the technology, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you've basically been using crypto. I know a lot of people have been investing, quote unquote, in especially Bitcoin over the last number of years, but you've actually been using it in your day-to-day life. Can you kind of walk us through that journey? Like, how did you get interested in it in the first place, and what kind of put you on the path to becoming a crypto user?
Yeah, so as far as I remember, I mean, I was homeschooled, so I got a good education.
Mhm.
And as part of that, uh, I learned from the early days about the history of money, about
Right.
what is money, where does it come from? And there are these like kids' books that show like, oh, well, we're bartering now, and then we trade this little piece of rock, and then we make coins out of it, and then it kind of goes all the way up until you have paper notes as kind of a sign of a sign of precious metal ownership.
Right.
And I always remember at that point when you hit they moved to the modern fiat currency system, the modern fractional reserve, et cetera.
Right.
They kind of glossed over like what happened with the gold, what happened with the silver, what happened with the precious metals that were the actual money, and the representation thereof. It continued, but they just got rid of the actual stuff. And that's kind of a record scratch moment that always stuck out to me about, well, what happened to it? And then, of course, you start hearing people like Ron Paul and all the rest, and Austrian economists talking about the gold standard and about how going off of it is terrible and all this kind of stuff. So as long as I remember, I don't think there was a single time where I understood that money existed, like what money was, that I did not understand that there was something wrong with not having it tied to something real, such as gold or silver.
Right.
So that's kind of I guess maybe a unique perspective. But also, I grew up in the north of Mexico, and I remember my grandmother had a lot of these old pesos that were just no good anymore. And then we had the new pesos, and like, well, why are these better?
Right.
Well, there was a currency collapse, and then the old one broke, so we use the new ones now. And it always sort of stuck in my mind about money's not this eternal thing.
Right.
These government monies can collapse, and they do collapse. It wasn't something that's like, I think especially in the US, where you have the dollar's persisted for, in some way, shape, or form, kind of hundreds of years.
Right.
And obviously with different levels of backing, but still, a lot of people can't even imagine their dollars not being worth anything someday. Whereas if you go to almost every other country, I mean, obviously you go to Mexico, you go to Europe. I remember when I used to live in Europe, seeing storefront prices in some of the smaller towns with older populations, all priced in francs alongside euros, because they used to use the francs until like not too long ago, and then they switched. Yeah. So I always had this sort of perspective of, what happened to the money. And as such, you hear a lot of people talk about in kind of more freedom-minded circles, like, we need to get back to the gold standard. We need to do this. We need to do that. And it was always a hypothetical where people were just saying, wouldn't it be great if?
Right.
Wouldn't it be fantastic if we could do this? And maybe I'm just not a very, patient person or bright, but for me, I always thought, well, okay, let's go do that. But
Yeah.
then the answer is always, well, we'll implement policy, blah, 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 something like that. Like there's always some like vagueness, but I wanted to take action right away. And so as part of that, I was kind of researching Euro Pacific Capital, which is a Peter Schiff's company,
Right.
had this like gold-backed debit card, and I was really trying to get into getting one of those. Not available to U.S. citizens, and so I was like, well, let me try my Mexican citizenship. And I was like in the process of trying to figure that out because I wanted to live off of real money and not off of the fake stuff. And around that time is when I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, which, for those unaware, is basically a movement to get all the freedom, as many freedom-minded people as possible to concentrate in one small population state and basically be able to influence the direction of the state in a more direct, in a greater way than the very minuscule number of freedom lovers percentages of the whole population across the country.
Right.
So on my journey up there, it had been about a year before I ended up moving. Somewhere in 2012, I heard about this thing called Bitcoin, and everyone's talking about it, and all these like Ron Paul forum people were talking about it. And I kind of heard over time that it was more of a digital gold. Like this is something that's someone made this money that's like gold, but it's digital. And I kind of understood it vaguely, but it wasn't until I was in the process of moving up to New Hampshire that I actually acquired some. Someone paid me back for a pizza, oddly enough, with Bitcoin. And after that, and after using it a few different times, it clicked with me pretty quickly that this was before the payment app days, where before like Venmo and stuff had come out, where people could easily send each other money through their bank accounts or whatever. And so I experienced basically that payment app experience with some sort of a digital gold, like a sound money that also is not tied to anyone's identity. And you didn't need to apply for an account or anything to sign up to get one. You just download any old app and you could do it right away.
Yeah.
And it kind of blew my mind about like, it clicked to where this is hugely important to the future of humanity, where imagine if money was just this easy. Anyone can pay anyone, any amount, anywhere, no restrictions. And you don't have to do a sign up process. The government doesn't control it. And it's not even dollars that can be inflated away. It just seemed like, I guess, like the combo breaker, right? The whole combination of everything I was looking for with, freedom. And I thought this is something that can really like make a difference for the world. So yeah, since then I've been pretty focused on this technology.
Yeah, it's interesting. My first exposure to Bitcoin was probably around the same time, and I was given payment for a project I was doing in Bitcoin. And I remember kind of thinking along those terms, this is fantastic. It's a great way to transact, do transactions without having any intermediary, and it's anonymous and all of these great things. It seems like at some point, Bitcoin in particular, it went from being a money to being like this asset investment that everybody's trying to get rich off of. And I kind of wonder where that shift came about. Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah. Obviously with social movements and things, it's hard to, pinpoint a shift specifically, but I did sort of notice a little bit about that. I think, first of all, the value proposition of this technology, when the price of the coin is not very high, it's purely transactional, I would say, because what else can you do with it, right? You can just use it as a vehicle to send things and build kind of separate economies, and especially people built micro tipping type things, and then they built like little casino games and things like that just you don't need to care if you get real money out of. They just kind of built alternative little economies and these fun little tokens. And I think it's a product of two things. First off, you had value actually start moving into the project, where when I started using Bitcoin, it was like $130 per coin.
Right.
And, at its peak recently, it was like $69,000.
Yeah.
And it would be 69,420 actually, which is kind of I can't imagine how that wasn't intentional. Someone didn't pump it to exactly that amount.
Right.
But
that's awesome.
Yeah, but so I think it became useful as a speculative instrument once it got enough value.
Right.
Um, and the other thing though is, and this is where this could be like a several-hour discussion just on the block size wars. But at
Right.
some point, the capacity to transact for the main Bitcoin network um, did not get increased, and there was a lot of arguing and fighting and stuff like that over that.
Hmm.
But basically, it was just let's leave it the way it is. So now there's like a few 100,000 transactions across the whole network every single day, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And so as a result, what happens with scarcity, right? You have scarcity of transaction capacity.
Hmm.
People want to transact over this network, so there's the demand with the constricted supply, and that drives up prices. And so then
Right.
you get high transaction fees. And
Hmm.
right now, because the space is so diverse and there's so many different projects, the fees are like 50 to 70 cents per Bitcoin transaction. So it's not terrible today, but that's because a lot of the demand is were moved on to competitors.
Right.
But it's basically that kind of caused things to have a shift towards a more hoarding, let's just use this to make money kind of aspect. And also, I mean, I'm going to throw a bit more of a sympathetic angle there too, a little bit.
Sure.
Crypto, especially Bitcoin in the early days, is like a raw natural resource.
Right.
And it's just like you're mining. I mean, a lot of parallels, but like you discover gold, you
Hmm.
get big lumps of gold. And some people, it's just thought, hey, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to hold on to it, and at some point, I'm going to trade it for more goods and services.
Right.
Then you have crazy people like me who are like chipping off little nuggets of it and getting out my scales and like weighing it and
Right.
trying to buy, like I'm trying to use it for a medium of exchange today before there's well-established mints and coinage to just print to stamp the coins and make sure it's just easier to trade. Back when it's like a rough natural resource, I've kind of learned there's a lot of steps that it takes to end up being a fully functioning global economy out of raw technology such as this. And so I understand that it just, the easiest thing that people will do is what they'll gravitate towards. So it's easier to just, I'm going to buy some and just wait until other people do the hard work. And then
Yeah.
my money's going to be worth more.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really good explanation. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, this technology in the big scheme of things isn't very old. It's still very, very new. And I think in our 21st century minds, things that were in 2020 were ancient history. But in a sense, we're still very early in the evolution of cryptocurrency and blockchain, and it's no telling where it's going to go. If you look at the evolution of any technology or any type of new product or innovation, you see these steps that they kind of go through as they work toward maturity. As you're doing business now with cryptocurrency, I'm kind of guessing you're probably not primarily using Bitcoin. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I still use it a little bit here and there, but starting in 2016, transaction capacity problems became bad enough that it just became really difficult for me to use. And so it was about around a year and a half, 2 years into using Bitcoin that I decided to stop being paid in dollars
Hmm.
and just focus entirely on that. And so that worked great for like a good 9 months or so until transaction capacity started not be, optimal.
Right.
And at that point, I had a choice. Do I just give up on this experiment or do I try to find a different way?
Hmm.
So I decided to try to find a different way. And the different way was, thankfully, at that point, there was quite a few different cryptocurrencies that were out there that were competing with Bitcoin, doing similar things.
Hmm.
And so I went down the list and found the first one that I thought I could reasonably try to use as payment and live on, which
Hmm.
is a cryptocurrency called Dash, which is kind of a portmanteau or whatever of digital cash.
Hmm. I've heard of
And
Dash.
that's still primarily what I use today. For I would say like 80 to 90% of my payments and stuff today is what I use.
Okay.
And since then, the space has diversified so much that it's almost it's almost like different cryptocurrencies are like using different apps to where, although it's clearly like a technology behind the app, right? But
Right.
because of just how many different uses there are for different protocols. And so, like I use a few for the payment stuff. There's a protocol called Library that I use to upload a lot of content, like videos and things like that.
Right. And isn't
And
Odyssey built on
yes,
Odyssey's
it
built
is.
on Library, correct? Yeah. So you can get the GodArchy podcast on Odyssey.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are, as far as frequency of ones I use, it's probably Dash and Library, because every day almost or 5 times a week or something, I upload something to Odyssey.
Right.
And then I, make most of my payments with Dash. I use a few different other ones as well. One I'm particularly excited about is called Thorchain, which, Thor after like the god of thunder and all that,
Mhm.
which, despite the sort of, goofy name, is basically a exchange protocol that works across all different cryptocurrencies, pretty
Oh,
much.
wow. Okay.
So it's basically like imagine it's part of this thing we call DeFi, or which is a shortening of decentralized finance.
Mhm.
So cryptocurrency is decentralized money, decentralized
Right.
digital money. Decentralized finance is the financial system, but built in an automated way.
Hmm.
And I'm just in the process of writing an article. It might be out by the time this podcast is out, for Human Events, that talks about the whole FTX collapse. It kind of breaks down DeFi in a really, hopefully, user-friendly type way. But it's basically like an automated system for the financial system. Like, whereas imagine if instead of going to the bank and starting a savings account, you just put your money into a machine that is not run by anyone, just like an automated machine, and automatically spits out interest every once in a while on your
Huh.
things. Or an automated currency exchange, where if you want euros, you stick it into a machine, you get euros back out, and there's no one running the machine. It's just
Oh,
kind
wow.
of
Okay. Yeah.
automated. And so it's making a decentralized financial system is kind of the next step past decentralized money. And then you get into, of course, the whole NFT space, which is so, I guess, vast that it's hard to really pin it down. We've mostly seen a lot of like the kind of creative type things, but
Right.
eventually almost any sort of record keeping system, whether it's, property titling, or whether it's legal contracts, or whether it's almost shares in equity or anything, is all going to go in the direction of NFTs.
Mhm.
And so we're basically slowly seeing the old systems that were kind of run by like monolithic institutions that don't have our best interests at heart. We're starting to see all of those become transmitted. We're becoming kind of replaced by kind of like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon, by these decentralized systems that anyone can take part in, and anyone can use and also take part in running,
Mhm.
and that work a lot better and more efficiently. And so when we start to think about the implications of that for our species as a whole, I think we're looking into some obviously trying times ahead, but I think that we're about to kick it into a new era of freedom for our species. And I'm pretty excited about that.
I like hearing that optimism, because in this day and age, it's very easy to be black-pilled and
Mhm.
and pretty negative about the prospects. So that it is exciting. And again, as you're talking, I'm just thinking we are in the very early stages of this. And I think a lot of naysayers don't have any kind of vision of what lies ahead, that they're stuck in, well, this is how it is, this is it, and this is all it's ever going to be. And of course, it's not like that at all. I guess the question I'm sure a lot of people are asking is, how in the world do you find people who are willing to take payment in cryptocurrency? Like, how do you get groceries or pay your rent, or all of the daily bills? For me, like, how would I pay my property taxes using crypto?
Well, that's the exciting thing about this whole thing is, luckily I was in a position where I was able to experiment.
Mhm.
And the answer to that question has been in flux over the years.
Okay.
Uh, Basically, the consistent bit was, I could find certain limited websites and services that would take it directly,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd have to heavily use those. And then in the local community, especially this Free State community here, I could almost find plenty of people who would be willing to trade.
Right.
Now and then of course you talk to your local barber, you talk to your whatever, and then you have a collection of these businesses that will take it, probably just to do you or you or a couple friends a favor, but still.
Right.
And that's just kind of the way it was in the early days. Over time, it's gotten to where more and more places will take it directly.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, at one point in downtown Portsmouth, which is semi-close to where I live, where you had a concentration of like dozens of businesses in a small downtown area that all took it. And, obviously things shift around, but there are still a few that do take it at that location.
Mm-hmm.
And you have instances like in the Caracas area of Venezuela during when times started to get really rough for them.
Mm-hmm.
There was over 2,000 to 3,000 different businesses that took Dash specifically.
Yeah.
And over time, obviously, you're in the middle of a giant economic upheaval. A lot of those businesses completely went under and weren't around anymore, but there's still a lot of major supermarkets and chains that take a variety of cryptocurrencies in Venezuela today. Then you have El Salvador, et cetera.
Yeah.
You have a lot of this going on. Where we're at today, I feel like my feeling, and I've been saying this a lot because I want to put it out there, so if I'm wrong, like people actually call me on it.
Right.
My feeling on this is this next bull cycle, because there's roughly 4-year cycles in the cryptocurrency markets.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's not programmed in. That's just the way markets tend to work, right? Market cycles. And I think we're probably a good year into the bear market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we got probably another year of bear market, and then we have 2 more years after that until we hit the next bull market peak. So somewhere into the next bull market, I think we're going to start to hit like an early majority adoption phase where you might see a significant percentage of people start to use this.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm kind of thinking that is, for me today, living on crypto has become much, much easier every single year. And right now, there's a collection of a few different services that just with using like a couple different apps, you can live entirely off of crypto and not have to be, a seasoned pro like I am at this, kind of scrounging around for ways to spend it. So for example, there's this one company I use a lot called BitRefill, which not only lets me pay my phone bill, but has a bill pay functionality that lets you pay everything from like your water bill to your property taxes or anything.
Huh.
So that's the vast majority of bills right in just one service already. Yeah. And so you get all that. And then there's another app that I use frequently that's specifically for Dash, but there's some other wallets that do something very similar called Dash Direct that basically plugs into a network of gift card providers. And the user experience is simple enough that you can buy a gift card while you're in line or after they give you the total for whatever at a lot of big box stores. So for example, I go to Best Buy, I want like a new USB cable of some kind. I go there, it's like $12.99. In this app, I type in $12.99 on the Best Buy screen, hit buy, I send a cryptocurrency transaction, and it gives me a gift code. Turn my phone around, they scan it, and it's as if I paid with cryptocurrency, basically.
Huh.
And that covers the vast majority of, or I would say like the majority at least, of the kind of more big box commercial type establishments. And you can already live off of just those. And then there's, of course, a few little mom and pop shops that take crypto directly. And there's a few, they're kind of rare right now, but there's a few coming out too, which are services that will provision a prepaid debit card, a virtual prepaid debit card on demand. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure everyone, I don't know about everyone, but the more paranoid, cash heavy type people have bought like a Visa gift card in like a Walmart or something like that. And then it's basically a digital version of that don't have a fee to create, that you can create for any amount basically, or within certain limitations, I guess, with cryptocurrency. And so the way you could do that is, let's just say there's some site that's not a big box kind of company out there, and doesn't take cryptocurrency directly, but you can just, whatever the exact amount is with crypto right there, buy a Visa gift card for the exact amount and just spend it all right there. Or you can then take that and put it into your little digital wallet, like your Apple Pay or whatever, and then go tap and pay with your phone and pay anywhere, basically. So if you use just like 2 or 3 apps, you can basically live on crypto entirely in the US today, as well as in a whole bunch of other countries. And the fact that it's that easy today makes me really think that within the next couple of years, it's going to be even easier and a little bit more mainstream to where you don't have to use these workarounds.
Yeah.
So, for example, I know that I can't remember the exact name, but there's a point of sale provider that's in a lot of grocery stores, has that little pin pad type thing.
Yeah.
That's been integrating into cryptocurrency as well. There's a few different, like Square, the Square point of sale system is owned by Jack Dorsey, who's a big cryptocurrency advocate himself, and they've been working on getting some sort of crypto integrated into that as well. We've seen a bunch of high profile integrations like AMC theaters and things like that are starting to add it. And then already PayPal lets you buy in whole cryptocurrencies in their own wallet. So does Cash App. So do a whole bunch of different payment apps. And I believe, I can't remember if it was, I think it was JP Morgan is coming out with like a cryptocurrency back end for one of its products. I have to look up that again. But basically, there's a lot of things that pretty soon, I expect within a couple of years or so, you should be able to basically continue using most of the services you use today, most of like the payment apps, the bank accounts, etc., but be able to have cryptocurrency balances in those and kind of spend from there. Now, I should give a little bit of a disclaimer on that part, which I think that's fantastic news, but I don't think people should largely do that because you're still trusting your money, even though it's maybe a better, more modern money. You're still trusting your money to another party. You're still saying, here, bank, here, PayPal, hold on to my money and let me spend it through you. And if I say something too naughty, you can still suspend my account.
Right.
So I still don't think you should do that. But the fact that if that makes the digital currencies more of a currency, like more broadly used, then there's a lot more services that you'll be able to start using to pay directly. So then maybe instead of, let's go buy it Square through Apple Pay, or use your payment app to do that, and you deduct your PayPal Bitcoin balance to whatever, you should be able to use your Bitcoin you hold, for example.
Right.
You actually own and hold to do that same thing. So I think that we're coming up on that pretty soon.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's it's because this is the part about cryptocurrency you don't really hear about if you're following kind of the mainstream narrative. The mainstream narrative is all about, it climbed to, what'd we say, 69,420, and now it's down to 20. That's where all of the focus is, and I honestly, I feel like I'm marginally informed. And I had no idea that all of this was going on. So that's why I wanted to talk to you. Can you give, again, kind of a dumb guy version about what happened with FTX? I think that's on a lot of people's radars because, people like Tom Brady are getting sued. But I don't think most people have any earthly idea, like, even what FTX was. I think a lot of people think, well, Bitcoin collapsed, and of course that's not really what happened. Can you kind of summarize what's going on with that?
Yeah, the best way I could quickly summarize this is 2008, but no bailouts.
Okay.
So this is literally, FTX was an exchange, one of the larger ones, basically a crypto bank, a centralized institution, just like a bank, a big financial institution. And what happened was there's a lot of things that happened. So I'm having to stick to the highlights here. Basically what happened was they did not have customer deposits one for one, which means they got customers to deposit money to use on the platform, and then they took that money out and lost it speculating and gambling on a bunch of other stuff. And then there was a bank run, and then they ended up basically being shown as being insolvent and then collapsing.
Okay.
And
yeah, that makes sense. It's basically like the old style bank run, except it's Bitcoin based.
Yeah. Now the crazy thing about this is, today, most competitors to FTX, which are also centralized financial institutions and as such should not be trusted to hold on to your money, like Coinbase, for example, hold their customer funds one for one. So if you deposit 5 Bitcoin in there, they have 5 Bitcoin ready to give back to you at a moment's notice.
Right.
And I should say that that's not how banks work, right?
Oh, we know that.
Yeah, we have fractional reserve banks today, and FTX was essentially a fractional reserve crypto bank, except that it ran a bunch of high risk activities, and then a bank run ended up wiping them out. Except the difference is they were fraudulently fractional reserve.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that everyone who signs up for a bank account, whether they realize it or not, are kind of agreeing to the fact that it's fractional reserve.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas with FTX, people thought that they had all the money that they said that they had. It turns out they didn't. And they fraudulently stole everyone's money and, did that. And the dominoes effect was that there was they were involved with a bunch of other players in the space.
Right.
But then now lost a significant amount of capital because they had a bunch of equity in this company. And it kind of had a little bit of a dominoes effect and hurt a whole lot of things.
Right.
Now, the outrage part of this, other than this crook stole everyone's money, is the fellow involved with this, Sam Bankman-Fried, a young fellow, barely 30 years of age, is extremely well politically connected to the Democratic Party infrastructure and left-leaning political causes. He's extremely well connected there. He individually gave over $40 million to Democratic causes for this midterm election. He's the second largest individual donor behind George Soros. Wow. He's been giving, he's given money to a lot of different publications. He's basically bought himself into the good graces of the system. And he was a heavy proponent of regulating the crypto space increasingly. And he's kind of the Judas of the space because he kind of used his insider position to regulate, to basically stab the whole space in the back and saying everyone needs to succumb to these usurious regulations that would do nothing but hurt his competitors and help his business model stay on top.
Imagine that.
And, yes, of course. Imagine that. And people were already mad at him for this. And then he basically collapses a good chunk of the space through his crazy bank run nonsense. And not only is he the one advocating for this, but then he starts to, I would say accidentally, create circumstances that would make it a lot easier for this kind of regulation to become enacted.
Right.
And the legacy media has been treating him with kid gloves. Like this guy scammed more people than Madoff, right? This guy is a real crook. He's lost people untold billions of dollars. And the media is treating him like, oh, he dared to try and he's just a good kid and all this kind of nonsense, which shows just how corrupt the system got, because why are they defending a random crypto dude except that he kind of bought and paid for their support? And I have nothing good to say about this fellow, unfortunately.
Yeah, the media spins kind of like, oh, oops. Very interesting. So before I close out, I wanted to just kind of maybe talk about some of the downsides, because I'm pretty pro crypto. So full disclosure, most of my listeners probably know this, but just so you know where I'm coming from, I actually work for Peter Schiff's gold company. It's not really his gold company anymore, but Schiff Gold. And people know that Peter is very anti-crypto, and so I'm not there, but I do understand some of the downsides potentially. I guess the biggest one to me, and I'm just curious how you would address this, is that the whole idea of cryptocurrency is dependent upon an electrical grid and the internet. What how would you prepare in a world where you're using crypto exclusively? How would you prepare for an event where you maybe not have access to either electricity and or the internet?
Well, one thing's for sure, the world we live in today is extremely dependent on the internet and electricity to a lesser extent, but I mean to a greater extent, I should say, but like similar.
Right.
And in the event where both of those collapse entirely, so first off, as far as outages, like intermittent outages, decentralized systems such as cryptocurrencies tend to fare much, much better. Whereas, so for example, if something happens to Wells Fargo server infrastructure, you can't access your bank at all, period.
That's a
Whereas
good
if
point.
something happens to some of the major Bitcoin mining pools or anything else, there's as long as some are still online, you can access some, you still got it, you can still use it. And when everything goes back online, everyone's balances, et cetera, the entire ledger just resyncs and everything's fine. It's much more, you're not going to lose, you're not going to permanently lose records or funds in a blackout like you might with something like a bank.
Right.
And
That makes
so,
sense.
first off, it's more
Redundancy is a
resistant.
beautiful redundancy is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And also, if we're at a stage where we just don't have the internet anymore for long, protracted periods of time, uh, I hate to say it, but money is the least of our concerns.
That's
Like
probably true.
at that point, hospitals aren't working. At that point, the electrical grid isn't working. At that point, roads aren't, being maintained or, policed or anything. At that point, you want food, water, shelter, and lots of lead.
Right.
And
You're
I
basically
think
back
that,
to barter at that point.
yeah, and I think at that point, having a reserve of gold bricks in your basement is not going to help you more than if you have like you're already just prepared with other things. Like
Yeah.
at that point, I think we're beyond the sort of currency trading point. I do think that it is always uh, it is always of sound, it is sound advice to always diversify investments, and I'm
Hmm.
sure that in some cases you might have a use for precious metals where you're kind of an interim spot where like you have rolling blackouts, so it's not like the internet's completely gone. It's just like not super reliable, and then it might be useful to have something else. So like, as always, diversify. I just think that the best thing to diversify into is you know ammunition and things like that,
Right.
and ways of actually like surviving apocalyptic scenarios.
Right.
Yeah,
Ammunition, booze, and cigarettes have always been
yeah.
the go-to currencies. I personally do hold some silver because I think that
Mhm.
silver is the most easily bartered um, money. Gold, like you said, gold bars are really hard to deal with. That's a really good answer, I think, to that question. But that's definitely
Yeah.
one that comes up.
And I have to say, I do follow Peter Schiff. I've been, of course, a fan of his for a long time. And I read all of his crypto posts, and there's like two-thirds of it is like spot on.
Yeah.
So I value his criticism because he's criticized, he's mostly correct on what he's criticizing. I think that the downside might be that he sort of paints with a broad brush when he should be singling out specific things. But
Right.
that's, I understand for brevity and for branding and stuff, you want to kind of do that. But like,
Sure.
there's a lot of emperors have no clothes type stuff in the crypto space, which I think we've seen that highlighted with the whole FTX collapse. It wasn't just FTX, it was also a bunch of other players in the space that were doing some shenanigans. But the good thing about a free market is when things collapse, they should have collapsed and they
Right.
can get built back better. They can build back better, to use a famous term, in a much better way, in a much more sustainable way that kind of works out right. So
Right.
also I have seen Peter Schiff talking about using cryptocurrency for like gold backed tokens and things like that.
Sure.
And I think that eventually, because most of the precious metals game, I should say, is not related to just physically trading physical pieces of precious metals. A lot of it, I would guess, is trading digital certificates or physical certificates, but still certificates about that. And the especially the NFT world, but also tokens and stuff, it should be pretty easy to tokenize gold and trade that, on the blockchain. It's just that obviously the devil's in the details about how you do the physical and digital union. Like, how do you keep proving that the reserves are still in there and the physical is fine, et cetera. There's a few little details to be ironed out, but I think you can do that, and you can basically, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, thanks to crypto, you should be able to live on gold. Just use gold as your reserve currency, and just it works out pretty well. Something that was not achievable before crypto. So I do think that we're going to see a melding of the worlds in the respective worlds in the next few years.
Yeah. I think Peter's criticism has been, as much as anything, focused on kind of the bubble that was kind of created in the Bitcoin space with the investments and those type of things, more so than the actual concept itself. And there's a pretty interesting article. I think Ryan McMakin wrote it, but it was over at the Mises Institute, talking about how the Federal Reserve loose monetary policy kind of fueled that speculative asset-based money flowing into Bitcoin. And I think he does a pretty good job of kind of highlighting how that worked. We've seen that speculative asset bubble in a lot of the technology world. With the Nasdaq being particularly bubbleized with the last several years of crazy monetary policy. So this is why I really wanted to kind of talk to you and focus in on really the more nuts and bolts aspect of it, and kind of get away from the speculative mania that seems to hit the mainstream. So I really appreciate your insight, and I think it's just fascinating that you've been able to order your life in your world in such a way as to utilize cryptocurrency. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of future, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. And especially if the freer market we can maintain, I think the more interesting the developments will be, because we can have competitions, and things can, fail, and new things can grow up out of that. And that's really what you want to see in any kind of evolving market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we see the kind of growing pains in any kind of new and radical system or community.
Right.
I've been in a lot of radical communities and fringe and marginal groups over the course of my life. And one thing that people don't like to mention is that there's a lot of sketchy people that show up there first. The first wave. The very first people are the true believer types. Mm-hmm. Then the second wave is a lot of, scammers and stuff, the unsightly characters, I should say, who have kind of been kicked out of everywhere else. And then they look to radical movements to kind of, because that's the only place that they can be. And once the radical movement kind of matures enough to kick out the bad actors, then of course they float on to the next one. So I've seen that with the crypto world, where in the beginning you have these like hardcore true believer people, and then they had like a few waves of like get rich quick scammer type people. And I think that wave is starting to wash out now after the whole FTX collapse.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be a lot more just, I'm sure there's always going to be idealists and people like that in there, but I think it's going to be a lot more regular people just becoming regular users and things. And so, I mean, for crying out loud, Starbucks is launching its loyalty program on the Polygon blockchain. So, I mean, pretty soon people are going to be getting their Starbucks rewards in crypto form. And at that point, I think that's about as normalized as you can get.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty awesome. So where can folks find, I know you do some writing and stuff, where can folks find stuff that you're producing?
Yeah, so I would say if you go onto Odyssey and YouTube and all those, look up Digital Cash Network. That's the channel I do to educate about crypto. Okay. There's a video in there I made, which is called like what is crypto and how does it work, that kind of, it's like a 40-minute long breaking down of from the history of money to where we're at today, and kind of, make it all very understandable for new folks. On Twitter, I go by the Desert Links, and that's probably where I'm more active.
Okay.
And then if you subscribe, if you're a subscriber to the Human Events website, then I put out some opinion pieces there, mostly on crypto and things. And that's probably the more audience specific, the more audience tailored kind of venue, because it's more of like a political magazine / general. It's not a crypto focused one. So everything I write for Human Events is probably going to be a little bit more tailored to a less technical audience.
Gotcha. Well, we'll put links to all of that stuff on the show notes page so people can easily find them. And I do a special little bonus for my supporting listeners called the Mudslide Round. Are you willing to hang around for a minute and do some mudslide questions with me?
Yeah, absolutely. I love a good mudslide.
All right. Well, then for our regular listeners, we'll go ahead and sign off. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. You did a fantastic job of giving really good, clear explanations of things, and I feel more educated, and I'm hopefully the listeners do as well. So I appreciate that.
No, thanks.
All right. Well, hopefully that gave you a little bit more insight into the world of cryptocurrency and how it's being used. I'm still fascinated with the fact that Joel is using crypto on a daily basis in his everyday life. And I think there's a future in that. And I think this is pretty cool. So, of course, you can catch more. You can hear that mudslide round that was mentioned just by being a supporting listener of GodArchy. And of course, you can do that over at GodArchy.org. Just hit the support GodArchy button. As little as $5 a month, you can be a supporter of GodArchy and also the Libertarian Christian Institute. And we would definitely appreciate your support. Before I go, I want to tell you about one other sponsor of the GodArchy podcast. You've probably heard about CBD. You'll hear that it is a treatment for a number of conditions, from anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain. But does it work? Well, I can tell you from experience that it has helped me deal with the pain and inflammation of arthritis. I started using CBD about 4 years ago when I was diagnosed with severe arthritis in my hip. And even while continuing to play goalie as in ice hockey, I have pretty much eliminated over-the-counter pain relievers such as ibuprofen. There are a lot of CBD products out there. It can be confusing. I use Canna Hemp. It was recommended to me by a friend who's in the business. She did a lot of research, and Canna Hemp makes products for pain and inflammation as well as anxiety, sleeplessness. Visit cannahemp.com. That's CANNA hemp.com. And if you use promo code Michael15, you can get 15% off of your order. So check that out. Also, please check out the other shows on the Christians for Liberty Network. GodArchy is a part of that network. Other shows include the Libertarian Christian Podcast, Reformed Libertarians, the Biblical Anarchy Podcast, the Faith Seeking Freedom Podcast, and Good News, Bad News with Matthew Bellis. You can check all of that out over at libertarianchristians.com. And again, please support their work and follow them. Check out what's over there. Lots of great articles, lots of great resources for folks who are Christians and who want to live more free. So I think that's a wrap for the show for today. I really appreciate everybody listening. Y'all are wonderful. It means a lot to me that you're taking valuable time out of your day to listen to the show, and it's much appreciated. So thanks, and we'll talk to you again here in a couple of weeks. All right, it's time for the ending stuff. Again, thank you so much for listening to the show. Make sure you check out the website, GodArchy.org. You can sign up to our email list there. We're also on social media, on Facebook, at GodArchy.org. We're on the Twitters, at GodArchy. And you can also find us on MeWe. Just look for GodArchy. If you want to contact me, shoot me an email, info@godarchy.org. And of course, you can support the show. Just go to godarchy.org, hit the support GodArchy button, follow the instructions. Again, we really value your listenership. That's all. There's no more. Just listen to the music.